so I've changed the topic slightly because to talk about surgical technique and ACL technique rather than just talking about the Artelon itself. So the reason we were very interested in Artelon is I've been looking for a sort of biodegradable ligament for years. We know the history with LAS, with Dacron Gore-Tex, and in the 1980s was a complete disaster. So I really kept away from artificial ligaments for a long time until this came along, because this was biodegradable. Obviously, then the question is, when it becomes biodegradable, there's a major problem with synovitis, early OA, and that's what we were worried about at first. So at first, it was just another synthetic ligament for the knee, and then the more I read about it, the more interested I became. And so we started using Artelon in 2019. The good part is that it is biodegradable, and after 4 to 5 years, that in itself tells me that it gives time for the actual ligament to heal. So I'm using Artelon not as a replacement for the ACL or the hamstrings, but I'm using it in addition to. So basically, you're using I'm using Artelon as a strap to hold the ACL in position and to make sure it stays tight and it doesn't loosen up while the body heals itself. And what has really made the difference is that the early rehab with Artelon has changed my ACL ACL rehab completely. So it's high strength and it's also elastic, so it does give a bit. And also the other good part is I used to use a lot of allografts. And the problem with allografts is that one is that it's not off the shelf. You need sterile refrigeration, so I have to keep checking whether there's enough grafts in the fridge. And I've used hybrids for the last 10 years a day. And the reason I use hybrids is because I want a big ligament, and I can get up to 10, 11, 12 mm ligaments depending on the size of the patient. So this is basically a slide from Artelon themselves, and it shows that the implant which is here is actually being the Artelon which is here is actually being invaded by soft tissue and also by the tendon. So basically what happens with Artelon is that it becomes incorporated into your graft over a period of 4 years as it reabsorbs. So you don't lose the size of the ACL, and the ACL width and diameter stays the same. So June 2019, as Jeff was saying, and I started using it in November. I started using it even before it was approved, but November is the official date when it was approved in Malaysia. So I've done about 251 ACLs with this. I've done 5 revisions. ACL and ALLs together approximately 25, PCLs 11, PCL and PLC 25, and MPFLs very few. I don't see so many MPFLs for some reason. I've started using the patch actually in rotator cuff massive tears, and it's really useful as well. And that's the other area that you should look at. I'll show you some slides after this. So other places that people have used it for is in the ankle, which is which US have a lot of patients. I have never tried it in the ankle, to be honest with you, but I can imagine that it can be a good implant to use. People have used it in the wrist as well, and the elbow, and I can foresee that people will start using it the UCL in the elbow injuries and also in DRUJ and TFCC. So the Artelon size I use is 7.32. It's a combined hybrid with hamstrings, semi-T and gracilis sometimes, and sometimes a few patients on its own completely. And I'll show you one example later. So you should be able to obtain a graft of at least 8 millimeters. And in some patients with the hamstrings, I've gone up to as high as 12 mm in a big size patient. And basically what I try and do is I try and match the diameter of the ACL, at least side to side in the graft. So I measure every time I do an ACL reconstruction, I'll measure the side to side width so that I can get a ACL reconstruction which is at least the same size as the width of the original ACL. May not get the front to back, but certainly side to side you will be able to. So when you put it in, one of the things that people fail to do, and I've seen some of my colleagues not do, is that you have to stretch it out. Because it is elastic, but you do not want it to be too elastic. So you stretch it out and make sure that there is the elasticity is almost completely zero. You then thread the ACL through, the Artelon through the endo button, and then the hamstrings. And this is the way it's done. And then you have an ACL graft like this. And this will be at least 8 to 9 or even 10, 11, 12 millimeters in size. Okay. And don't forget, the head of the ACL of the graft is usually bigger than the stem. So you end up with a slightly smaller body and neck. So sometimes I will trim this so that I get an equal size, so that I actually know the ACL graft itself, the diameter of the ACL graft itself. And so this is what it looks like in the knee. So this is MT, this is Artelon double-stranded, and then it's MT. And the same thing with this. So if you look at this, is the left knee in here. Artelon is in the middle, and on the either side is the hamstrings. And it's also on this side, the Artelon in the middle, the hamstrings on either side. And this should be I mean, if you look at the ACL here, it's nice. It's a nice big size ACL that you can actually put in, so you know it's going to be sturdy. So ACL stump preservation is the technique I use. I try and keep whatever stump that is available to try and preserve the ACL. So this is the left ACL. So I've taken off a bit here and threaded the hamstrings and the Artelon through, and left as much tissue as I can over the top. I know this is strands and things, but to me, actually makes a lot of difference, because this is all very, very good ACL tissue that even if it does not become ACL, it actually helps the vasculature of the new ligament, and I believe that actually makes a difference to the long-term results. And so this is what I'm really interested in Artelon. I'm sure you've seen, some of you have seen patients like this. So this is a lady of 35, athlete, who came with a history of injury, no pop sound, and she tells me that her knee feels loose, it gives way. The MRI report says that it's a, inverted commas, partial tear, whatever that means. There's some high intensity in the fibers. So if you look at the ACL, look here, it looks normal, okay, until you start probing. So you put it to one side, okay, maybe there's a bit of give here, maybe you can forgive that. But if you pull hard, you can see the whole thing comes off. Well, it doesn't come off, but it actually stretches out. And then on the right side, which is even worse, you pull on the AM bundle and it moves completely. So she actually has an ACL tear. And even in 30 degrees of extension, you can see the ACL is actually loose. If you pull it, it just moves. It should be superior. It should be very tight at 30 degrees of flexion. You should not be able to move the ACL at all. So basically what she has is a stretched out, elongated ACL, which is still attached at the femoral attachment. So what do? I mean, the old way was just to take the whole thing down and put the hamstrings to ACL in. Well, what I've done here is, we replay this, is that I've actually made a hole. Like this. I've actually made a passage for the ACL, which is my femoral tunnel. So that's all ACL, that's original ACL, that's original ACL. You can see I've left most of the attachment here. Made a femoral tunnel where I can actually insert a piece of Artelon. And what you end up with is you do intra ACL drillings. So you have to be really accurate with this. So you drill in intra ACL, and then you pass the ACL almost blind into the tunnel here, so you can actually put it up into the ACL, into the old ACL stump, into the old ACL right up on the femoral tunnel. And so you end up with a very tight ACL with just Artelon. And this is where it's most useful. You don't have to take hamstrings, you don't have to take graft, you don't have to take anything. But this is few and far between. But this is the reason, part of the reason I'm actually interested in. I'm very interested in using this biodegradable ligament. At the bottom end, once you've put in the ACL, I straighten the knee, and then I'll pull on the Artelon before I actually put the screw in. So pull on the whole thing, tension it, and then only put in the screw in with the hamstrings. And so these are some MRIs post-op. You can see the Artelon is down here. That black line is the Artelon, and also over here on the lateral view. So this is a special view just to get the ACL view of the ACL on the MRI. So the ALL is the one that I find more, the other one area I find most useful. Lateral epicondyle. You drill a hole. You then pass the Artelon through, which is this here, and then drill another one over just above Gerdy's tubercle, and you pass the Artelon. And this is a video that was taken about 2-3 weeks ago. So lateral epicondyle, locate the lateral epicondyle. The drill hole is made posterior to the lateral epicondyle. And the drill is then directed superiorly 45 degrees and anteriorly 45 degrees. Okay, so drill hole or just posterior to the lateral epicondyle. Then I drill in 90 degrees first to get a grip on the lateral cortex, and then the drill is directed. Okay, 45 degrees proximal and 45 degrees superior. So it avoids your posteriorly placed ACL reconstruction. You can see there's an ACL reconstruction. I left the wires in. Okay. You then overdrill with the I overdrill with the endo button. And then for the femoral side, I will use a number 5. I will use a 5 mm drill. And note I don't drill all the way through to the middle cortex with the 5 mm drill. I only drill the lateral cortex for about 30 mm, 40 mm. Yes, I work with my music on quite loud. So the other one's going in. Let's pull through the proximal side. Okay. And then I'll fix it with a 6 mm screw. So on the femoral side, it's drill 5, fixed with 6. On the tibia side, it's drill 6, fixed with 6, because the tibia bone is a lot harder. So now tibia side, just above Gerdy's tubercle. Then the drill hole is directed towards the middle wound, so it's easier. So you don't have to open another wound. I'll put the video. So the Artelon is then passed underneath the graph, underneath the fascia lata. Okay, so this is the over drill on the tibia side with 6 drill. And the Artelon is passed underneath the fascia lata. Pull it down. Yeah, my nurse, when I start doing this, she'll start ordering the next case to come down. Okay. Then the head, basically just the head of the Artelon will go into the hole. You just have to pass the head in and pull through and not pull it too tight. It snaps in and that's it. So don't over tension it because then it becomes too tight. Okay, so this is where the major changes to my patients. I don't use a brace, I don't use crutches, and I full weight bear them. So post-op day 1, they start physiotherapy. If they can reach 90 degrees in the first day, they reach 90 degrees. If they have a meniscus repair, I restrict them to 100 degrees. Otherwise, I go for full range of motion within the first 2, 3, 4 weeks. So no brace, no crutches, full weight bearing. It just depends on their pain level. Now, I've put this in because like I said, I've done over 200, but I really need someone to go and look at my patients to see how my results are, because I really have not had the time to go and look at them. So if somebody is keen, please come along and have a look at them, and we'll call them all back in and then see what the results are like. Swimming, once the stitches come out, I will start them in swimming. Close chain exercises for 3 months. I will start them on running at 2 or 3 months, depending on how tight they are. If they're really tight, it's 2 months. If it's not so tight, then 3 months. And then the rehab the rehab and healing is the same. I will not let them back to football for about 9 months in total. So the rest of the time, between 3 months and 9 months, the rehab's about the same, but I will just push them faster. So a lot of my patients get bored because by the time they're 3 months, they're doing a lot of things. They all start saying to me, why can't I go back to football? Why can't I go back to basketball? And the answer is still no, because the healing, you still have to wait for the healing of the tendon to bone. The Artelon may give them a false sense of security because they're doing very well, but you still have to wait for healing to bone. So I warn them at the beginning, before surgery, that it still will take them at least 9 months to get back to twisting exercises. Post-op synovitis, it's difficult to assess. I mean, all of us, I think, have patients, even when I used to do hamstrings, post-op, they will swell for about a month. Some of them swell about 2 months, and it can be difficult to get down. Again, I do not have a control group, so I cannot tell you whether this is post-op synovitis just because of surgery and because of the tendon itself, whether it's because of the Artelon. Knee infection, I've unfortunately had 3 over the last 3 years. 1 wound infection which settled down, 1 with lymphadeninitis also settled down. Like I said, post-op swelling, I've had about 20 over patients with post-op swelling, which settles down after 2 to 3 months. But yes, I agree, it's a bit on the long side. Some a month, some 2 months, some 3 months. I've not had any failures of Artelon, although I know somebody who has had failure of Artelon. What I've had, interestingly, is failure of the autograft, and the Artelon is intact. And I'll show you this. So this is a 25-year-old footballer. After a year, went back to football, and somebody tackled him with the knee straight. And you can see the Artelon actually is intact, but the graft, his autograft, is completely snapped. So honestly, I do not know what to do with this guy. So I offered him, he said, you can do a revision or you can wait and see what happens. And he's gone away. He's not come back for about 6 months already. So I'm not sure where he is. So it'd be interesting if somebody reviews the results to see whether he's actually back playing football, whether this has snapped, this has got worse, or what's actually happening with this. This is the other view. You can see the Artelon tape is still intact and it's nice and wide, it's complete. But the autograph actually failed, not the Artelon. So he feels stable, and that's the problem. So he probably doesn't want to do anything because he feels stable. So I'm not sure how long it's going to last. So this is another patient. We've done for the PCL here. This is the Artelon. This is Artelon inside the PCL. And again, same thing. If you look at the knee, when you pull on the Artelon, the tibia actually reduces. So and this is the PCL graph. This is the ACL. So this was a combined ACL, PCL, PLC. You can see the PL. That's the Artelon going up with the graph, and then the ACL as well. And this is where it's most useful. Again, MPFL, Artelon graph here to the middle epicon, just below the middle epicondyl, middle edge of tibia. And this is where I started using the Artelon for the shoulder as well. So this was a 65-year-old gentleman with a massive tear, retracted and difficult to do. So if you look at this here, he's got a huge tear here. I managed to get some approximation sutures side by side here. But if you look at the video, it still leaves a big gap. You can see that there's still a huge gap in between. And so what I've done is put an Artelon patch, you measure it, cut it to size, and then stitch it down side to side here, right up to the top on anterior and posteriorly. And there you are, everything's in place. And so far I've done about, can't remember, 7, 8 with this patches, and so far they've done very well. And again, I mean, anybody who knows anybody who wants to come and review the results, please, you're most welcome to, because I haven't got the results. I really like to know my results also. Okay, this was this patient who just out of interest. This guy came to see me last week from a fall. It's an internal rotation hyperflexion fall. Watch his left. He fell in his right ankle. Okay, restart that one. He fell on his right ankle. His ankle twisted at 90 degrees, and then he then fell on his left knee with internal rotation and hyperflexion. Now watch left there. Okay. Now watch again. Left. The hyperflexion, internal rotation injury. And interestingly, he is 3 years after, everything's still intact. So whether it's Artelon or whether it's the ACL, I'm not sure. But you can see the Artelon is not as clear even on here, and so I think that Artelon has actually started to integrate with the hamstrings. All right, I've not gone through the pathology. I mean the Artelon itself, or what material it's made of. I'll leave that to the other Aaron to do it because he comes from the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your efforts to prepare us the very nice slides and videos. I think you must take a hard time to take all these videos, especially the last one. How come you can get the basketball video?
No, he sent me the video. I said to send to me. Because he was showing me on his phone. He said, okay, he sent to me, I got presentation in 3 days. He said, okay.
Oh my God. All right, that's great. Okay, and hi everyone again. I will introduce myself again. My name is Jeff. I'm the MC for today. And obviously I'm the part-time MC for today because just now at the beginning I announced the wrong cases done by Dr. Aaron himself. I announced 215 cases total, but actually it's 251 just ACL itself done by Dr. Aaron with Artelon. Together with all the patches and MPFL, I think Dr. Aaron's been done more than almost 300 cases. Dr. Aaron's been started to use Artelon since 2019, and everything's went well. Dr. Aaron is very happy with Artelon, and this is the reason he's here today to share his outcomes. And again, we are not, I'm guaranteed this is a very compliant sharing because we are not paying Dr. Aaron a single cent. not even a lunch or dinner. Okay.
No lunch, no dinner, got no time. Lunch, dinner, I spend at home with my family. Okay, it's okay.
All right. Okay. Now I believe that all of you must have a lot of questions on the science and what is the characteristics of this Artelon. And fortunate enough, today we managed to get Artelon's US, the HQ CEO, to be with us today himself to share us the science behind the Artelon itself. And maybe we will pass the time to Aaron Smith. Hi, Aaron. Are you
Good
there?
morning or good evening. Yeah.
All right. You. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to Jeff and the AthProtect team. I'm honored to be with you all today. And thank you to Dr. Lim. We're very excited about his experience with the product. And we wanted to share a little bit about the history of the product and just basic facts about the biomaterial, what it's made from and what it's designed to do. So if you give me a moment, I will share my screen. Okay. Are you guys able to see that? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So I give this talk very often. This first slide, I'm very big on music. I enjoy music as a hobby. So whatever city I'm in, I've always tried to choose a musician locally that represents the idea of harmony, because Artelon is the idea is that it works in harmony with the body's own tissues rather than as a replacement for those tissues or as a prosthesis. So I was trying to think of a musical act from Atlanta that people around the world might recognize, and all I could come up with was Outkast. So if you like rap or hip hop, that's our local team there. But it is a bit of a mindset shift to think about this biomaterial working as a scaffold and complementing the body's own tissues rather than replacing them. So if you go back to the beginning, this is Lars Peterson. Lars is a physician scientist from Gothenburg, Sweden, and he was the original inventor of this biomaterial. So for those of you who follow the cartilage research, Lars Peterson was the inventor of ACI, autologous chondrocyte implantation, one of the most published physician scientists in orthopedics. He's in the AOSSM Hall of Fame. He was the head physician for FIFA World Cup football for many years, for 30 years. So certainly a well-known guy. Dr. Lim mentioned early in the talk that back in the 1980s and 1990s, there were different biomaterials that were attempted in the knee for augmentation, and the results were generally not good. The reason that they were not good, one of them was biocompatibility. Those biomaterials were not that well accepted by the body. And the other one was mechanics. Those materials were often very stiff, and they overprotected the grafts that you were trying to get to heal. And then you would have graft resorption and stress shielding. So when Dr. Peterson went back to the lab to develop Artelon, he was attempting to overcome those two challenges with previous biomaterials. So this is what Artelon is and what was invented. So the Artelon biomaterial, if you look on the top right, it is a textile that's made out of a polymer. So that polymer is called polycaprolactone-based polyurethane urea. I know that's a mouthful. That's actually two different polymers that are put together into a copolymer. So polycaprolactone and polyurethane urea are both commonly used materials in medical devices and implants. They've been used for many years, great safety history. It's the combination of those two polymers that gives Artelon its unique properties. And as Dr. Lim mentioned, it's stretchy, it's elastic. If you think of Lycra, so if you think of garments that have stretch to them, they'll use a polymer called Lycra that's very elastic in those garments. Artelon is very similar to Lycra. It's creep resistant. You can stretch it many, many times without it permanently deforming. And it's generally, you can stretch it to a great length and it will always recover its shape. So we take this polymer, we extrude it into these fibers, and then we knit the fibers into this biomaterial. with the goal of recreating the mechanics of the body's own tissues. So we have this material available in strips of various widths, 3 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and 7 millimeters. We also have it available as patches, as Dr. Lim described for rotator cuff. And we have a lot of evidence in different indications around the body, but generally speaking, it is indicated for augmentation of repairs of either tendon or ligament procedures. So starting in the 1990s, they began to do a lot of research on this biomaterial. And there's really more research published than we could discuss today. But whatever scientific question you have about the biomaterial, we probably have an answer that we can provide you in the literature. So if you go all the way to in vitro data, tests that are done in the lab in Petri dishes, just looking at immunocompatibility, cell viability, all those things, we have it. There's a lot of long-term animal research that was published showing how tissue units remodel with Artelon, and that goes on to human clinical trials, up to and including long-term randomized controlled trials. So there's a lot here to discuss, but at this point, we've done over 60,000 procedures in humans with Artelon, and the safety record has been quite good. So when we talk about biocompatibility, inflammation is a very important discussion point. So if you look on the right, this is a typical tissue reaction from suture material. And what you can see in this histology slide, so the white fibers are the suture, and this is 1 week post-implantation in a rabbit model. You can see that the body has encapsulated that material, has walled it off from the rest of the tissue. There's really no integration. The red dots are immune cells. Those are macrophages and giant cells, and they're attacking that biomaterial and trying to break it down. So that's what we think of when we think of something that resorbs in the body. It's typically an immune-mediated reaction. So on the left is the Artelon biomaterial in the same model. So to contrast that, there's no encapsulation. You can see the blue in that stain is new collagen that's forming, and it's intimate with the border of Artelon. So you have good integration of the tissue right away. And you can see that the immune cells are evenly distributed throughout the tissue. They haven't recognized Artelon as a foreign body, and they're not trying to attack it and break it down. And that says a lot about how Artelon becomes a scaffold to develop new tissue then, and eventually will degrade through hydrolysis and go away, but will leave a new tissue in its place. So it has this, in bulk, the biomaterial has this open porous structure that allows cells to permeate the material and adhere to it. So the video that's running, that just shows that Artelon has this wicking property. So if you're into regenerative medicine, if you use PRP or bone marrow aspirate, things like that, Artelon is a good delivery vehicle for that. It wicks that material and holds it, localizes it to the environment. The third picture is a cell culture model. So this is mesenchymal stem cells cultured on Artelon at 9 days. And basically everything that's glowing green is a living cell. So you can see that cells are quite happy on this biomaterial. And we've looked at different types of cells, neural progenitor cells, chondrocytes, tenocytes, fibroblasts. All different types of cells are very happy on the Artelon biomaterial as a cell culture matrix. So over time, when you combine this biocompatibility with the mechanics of Artelon, which permits this developing tissue to stretch and to mature and to see those mechanical loads that stimulate the tissue to mature, you end up with fully developed tissue units. So on the right is an arthroscopic relook at, this is an ATFL ligament in an ankle, but that's at about 9 months post-op, I believe. And the Artelon is within that ligament. You can't really see the Artelon biomaterial. You just see the formation of new ligament tissue around it. And we have many different views of this, arthroscopic views in ACLs in the knee, other ligaments around the body. We have a lot of MRI confirmation. that these ligaments that are developing with the Artelon are vascularized tissue and are becoming more organized. So Artelon is a host material to develop new tissue. It's not in place of the body's own tissue. So going back to some of the animal research, this was a very big and sort of extensive animal study. Was done early in the 2000s. They looked at rabbits, guinea pigs, and there was also rats included, but they followed these animals for out to 2 years. And what you can see, and this was in an ACL in their knee, what you would see is that the ACL that was developing on the Artelon had stiffness and elasticity that was similar to the intact ligament in the contralateral knee. So it was developing tissue that was more normal. You also saw that that tissue was very organized. If you look at the slide on the top right, those blue bands across the top, that's new ligament tissue developing within the Artelon matrix. So you can see that it has that wavy sort of fibrillated texture in the collagen. That is how normal ligament tissue is constructed. It's designed to be elastic. And because the Artelon biomaterial is permitting that mechanical stretch, it's inducing that tissue to have that elastic structure. In the bottom right, this was a rabbit ACL at 3 years post-implantation. What's notable here is that in this animal model, they didn't use an autograft with this. So they just used a strip of Artelon as the primary graft. And you can see that it filled in with tissue, and that tissue became more organized and eventually formed a new ACL ligament around that. So that's certainly not what we would recommend in humans. In human procedures, we typically use it with an autograft. But it is good to see that Artelon will permit that growth and development of new tissue and will work in harmony with the body to develop that. We also saw in the animals that there were no safety concerns. So the animals that had the Artelon in their joints had no synovial reaction. They had no systemic response. You couldn't find Artelon anywhere outside the knee in those animals. And generally speaking, you had good, stable, healthy joints in these animals with good function and good health for the animals. So that brings us to human clinical research, and there's many studies published. This is the one we talk about the most. So this was Lars Peterson and 4 other centers did a big randomized controlled trial. They were comparing patellar tendon autografts to patellar tendon autografts augmented with Artelon. So those were your 2 study groups. And they had over 200 patients in the study. They followed these patients for 12 years, and they had biopsies in 21 of these patients. And what they saw over that 12-year period was that there was no difference in safety when you used autograft alone versus autograft with Artelon. The patients who had Artelon had 92% survivorship all the way out to 12 years. When you looked at MRIs or any arthroscopic relooks, you saw integration of the biomaterial into that ligament bundle. And then when you looked at patient outcomes, you saw trends towards improvement in the Artelon group. So the patients who had the augmentation with Artelon had more stable knees, earlier return to play, longer playing careers, and less arthritis in their knees. So it was a successful study, and we've continued to use this material for knees ever since. When you look at the biopsies that were taken from these knees, and this is a very technical slide, I apologize, but I'll try to make some sense of it. So this is looking at the rate of degradation of the Artelon biomaterial. And I don't recall if we mentioned earlier, but when you put Artelon in the body, over 5 to 6 years, it slowly degrades and it'll eventually disappear. 3 years after implantation, it'll have about 50% of its strength and its elasticity, and then it will continue to degrade from there. So the question that was being asked with this study is whether Artelon degrades through immune reaction, foreign body reaction, or whether it degrades just through hydrolysis, just by dissolving in water. So when you look at the chart, on the bottom axis is time, 0 to 6 years post-implantation. On the y-axis, the vertical axis, is the molecular weight of the material. So as the material breaks down, the molecules become smaller and smaller. The red data points on this chart are an in vitro study where they just put the Artelon biomaterial in water in the lab and just let it slowly dissolve. And you can see this sort of exponential decay curve as it goes further out. The material starts to break down more rapidly. What's interesting is in these 21, it's actually 21 human biopsies. So each black square is a different human biopsy at a different point in time, and they characterize the molecular weight. And you can see that in the human body, in the knee, the Artelon degrades at the same rate as it would in just a water bath. So the conclusion here is that there's not a foreign body reaction to Artelon. The body's not attacking it and breaking it down with cells and enzymes. It's simply hydrolysis that's the mechanism of breakdown. And that matches what we've seen clinically, which is that it's very benign. Artelon generally doesn't cause an inflammatory reaction or a lot of swelling or issues post-operatively. So it's very well accepted by the body and well incorporated. So I can speak a little bit to ankles. In the US, this has become a very popular technique to use Artelon to augment a brostrum repair in the ankle. Maybe I'll just go straight to the data because this is relatively new. So this was 225 patients that were treated. So this is a controlled study. 150 patients got the Artelon flex band. 75 patients got a brostrum alone without augmentation. And these patients were followed for almost 2 years. So this was just submitted to a journal for publication. The two main differences in findings, one was pain reduction. So at all post-operative time points, the patients who had the Artelon augmentation experienced less pain than the patients who had the brostrum reconstruction. And I think that is a consequence of greater stability. They had an augmented repair instead of a weak tissue that had been repaired with sutures. And it also speaks to the lack of inflammatory reaction to the material. So quite an improvement in pain. And then when you looked at rehabilitation, the patients in the control group took about 15 and a half weeks to get back to unprotected weight bearing, no brace or no boot or anything. The patients in the flex band group took about 9 weeks to get back to unprotected weight bearing. So there was a pretty rapid acceleration in rehab protocol for the patients that were augmented with flex band. They felt better sooner. When you look at clinical outcomes, it's only a 2-year study, but there were no difference. The patients all saw very stable ankles, good range of motion, satisfaction scores were high with the operation, and there were no adverse events in either group that were related to the product itself. So I think to bring it home, and we can take questions, there's a lot of other indications we can do. We spend a lot of time in the foot in the US. About 20% of our US business is in the knee and in sports. Maybe to speak to shoulders, because Dr. Lim mentioned it, if you go back to Sweden, there's a group at a university up there that now has 8-year data in rotator cuffs that we're writing up for publication. So we hope to have that data published later in the year. That data has been quite good. Those patients did quite well, and there appears to be a big improvement with the Artelon group versus the control group. But to summarize the biomaterial, the 3 main characteristics of it that we talk about, we call it the 3 R's. It restores stability because it has natural biomechanics. It resists necrosis of the autograft, and it permits regeneration of new tissue over a longer time. And when you look from the standpoint of facilities and payers, the pricing is competitive to allografts. It doesn't require any special handling. So it's sterile packaged. It's an implant. It can be delivered to the hospital, doesn't need to come in freezers or any special storage requirements. Facilities aren't dealing with handling of human tissue, tracking patient consents. It is terminally sterilized, and it has a 5-year shelf life in the package. So with that, I know I covered a lot in a short period of time, but I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. I believe everyone is quite convinced after your sharings and together with Dr. Aaron's his personal sharings on the cases. And now onwards, we are open for questions. Everyone can raise your questions, and we are happy to answer. And I'll be the first one who raised the first questions. I know I heard a lot of along these 4 years. I received a lot of feedbacks. Does insurance cover Artelon? Sorry, Aaron Smith, not for you. This question is for Dr. Aaron. Does
the answer is yes. Okay. Now, the insurance always queries me when I use Artelon. There are two things that you have to tell them when they query. One is that what I've done is that I've told them basically I need Artelon to get a big graph, because there's evidence to show that if you have a graph which is less than the size of 8 mm, your retag goes up by about 60 to 70%. So that's one. Two is, if you're going to need it for 2 ligaments, then you need Artelon or allograft. So Artelon is the choice. Number 3 is, you can actually question them. Instead of them making the decision for you, they will send you a letter saying Artelon not covered. Then you send a letter, you on the piece of paper, you then write a note. It says, please justify why Artelon is not covered. Because actually, with Bank Negara rules, Artelon or synthetic biodegradable ligaments are covered, because there is no, as long as it is approved by the MDA in Malaysia, they have to cover. It is not experimental. They basically what they do is that they will give you a letter to say that it's not covered, and then you accept it because you don't want to fight them, and so they just keep quiet. But if you actually write down please justify why Artelon is not covered, they cannot justify, because you can actually send a letter to Bank Negara and report them and says, why is Artelon not covered when it is actually approved by the MDA in Malaysia? They cannot justify that, and in their insurance policies, it does not say that Artelon or allografts are not covered. They have to cover. It's just that they don't want to pay. So when they don't want to pay, you just send your letters, Artelon not covered. It depends on whether you fight them.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Seems that you won the fightings for the past 4 years.
Yeah. so basically now when I do the ACLs, they don't fight with me anymore, because I will tell them, I will write a letter back and says, please justify why it's not covered when it is not stated in the insurance policy that this material is not covered. Then they will just keep quiet and give you a guarantee letter. They won't answer the letter, but they'll just give you a guarantee letter that says covered.
Right. Thank you.
All the insurances are the same.
Thank you.
You have to fight them, because otherwise they will just dictate what you can use or cannot use.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Aaron. The next question is for Dr. Aaron and Aaron Smith yourself. So I understand that Dr. Aaron, when he used the Artelon, he stretched the Artelon for ACL. So he will stretch the ACL before insert the screws. So Dr. Aaron found this is very useful. Is it the correct technique, Aaron, to stretch the Artelons before we fix it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, right? So I can tell you about the mechanical properties of Artelon. There's certainly no harm in stretching it. It's designed to be elastic and to be stretched. So maybe to go back to definitions, the definition of an elastic material is that you can stretch it and will recover its shape. So the alternative to an elastic material is plastic deformation. And that's where if you stretch something, it doesn't fully recover its shape. It will remain stretched at length a little bit. So the design goal of Artelon was to be elastic. So you can stretch it and it will recover its shape. And the testing would show that you could about double the length of Artelon and it will still fully recover. But because it's a textile, if you think about it, you've got all these small loops of fiber that are interconnected. So there is some amount of slack that can be taken out of that material before you start working against the fibers that are elastic. So I don't think it's critical that you do the stretching, but I think it could be useful. You might take 10% of that stretch out of the material and get it so you're working against the fibers rather than the loops of the textile.
Right.
Hope that made sense. Yeah.
Next question is for you again, Aaron. Is on the patch itself. We are utilizing the Artelon patch for the shoulder rotator cuff repair. So I received some question. Is the patch itself is very thin? Like they will suggest, are we going to have the Tickles patch designed for shoulder cases itself?
Yeah, I think in the future that's a possibility. I do think it's worth noting just one of the goals of Artelon, because when you think of other augmentations, they're often quite stiff. And we know from the knee data in the 80s and 90s that that was a failed strategy. When you put something in that's stiffer than the body's own tissues, then the tissues don't heal and grow the way they're supposed to. So the design goal with Artelon is actually to be less stiff than the tissue you're trying to help. So in the case of a rotator cuff, what you want is that reconstructed rotator cuff tissue to be seeing mechanical loads. You just don't want the tissue to be overloaded where you have a mechanical failure. So that's where Artelon comes in. It has relatively low stiffness. It permits the tissue to see the loads, but it has very high strength. It's very difficult to get it to fail mechanically. And Dr. Lim showed that in some of his cases, right? He had the one ACL case where the graft itself had failed, but the Artelon strip was still intact. I suspect that what will happen with that patient is the Artelon strip will eventually grow in with new tissue. And because the length of the construct was maintained, that patient's knee will start to function more normally over time. Now, will the patient tolerate it until it fully heals and regrows? That's a different question. So in the case of a rotator cuff, that thin patch has actually proven to be quite effective because it lets the body's own tissue do the work while preventing a gross mechanical failure. As we go forward in the future, we've invested a lot in our manufacturing capabilities. So we will have the opportunity to make different textile configurations. If we want ones that are thicker or bigger, strips in different widths or thicknesses, that will all be technically possible. So communicate with us and let us know what the clinical needs are, and we will try to help.
Right. Thank you, Aaron. Actually, in Malaysia, we've been using Artelon a lot in the ACL, in sports medicine, arthroscopy. So, and I understand that at US side, at the state side, you use a lot on the ankles. Probably, Aaron, you can share with us what are the good indications to use Artelon for foot and ankle side. We have some foot and ankle surgeons here in the group with us.
Of course. So I would say the most common indication for us is lateral ankle reconstruction, just augmenting the traditional Brostrom procedure. What we know with Brostroms, it's the most common operation, and you're simply just reconstructing the ATFL ligament that's there. Patients tend to do pretty well in the short term. It's an extended rehab period because that Brostrom repair is less than 50% as strong as an intact ligament. So Brostrom patients without augmentation take a long time to recover. And then over long-term studies, if you look at like 10-year studies, about 2/3 of those patients still have pain or instability. And about 1/4 of the athletes discontinue sport. So we know there's a lot of room for improvement with Brostroms. So we've been using Artelon to augment the Brostroms with very good outcomes. Another common indication is the medial ankle, deltoid and spring ligament reconstruction. I would say the most common indication there is flat foot deformity, patients whose arches have caved in, and it's a complex multiplanar deformity. And there's many different osteotomies that can be done to try and fix that, but there's been a lot of interest in reconstructing the spring ligament and deltoid because that is what actually failed that led to a flat foot. And there's a number of techniques to do that reconstruction. So that's become very popular. And then tendon repairs, Achilles tendon, peroneal tendons, anterior tibial tendons. Artelon is used very commonly with those procedures as well.
Right. So can we utilize Artelons on some hip surgeries, or I do?
Yeah.
I mean, your side, do you have any experience to use Artelons on distal biceps?
Yeah, so it has been used in distal biceps. It's also been used in ulnar collateral ligaments, as Dr. Lim mentioned. So I would say our experience has been somewhat limited. You know, we're still getting early data on some of those indications. The hip, you know, very occasionally it'll be used to augment like a labral repair or something, but I would say the usage in the hip has been less common. But you know, certainly around the shoulder and elbow, it's been used commonly.
Right, right. We receive a question here. Aaron, can we utilize Artelons on ACL or inside? Or inside?
Yeah, so I would say let Dr. Lim take that one. Yeah.
I must say I've never tried it, but all inside sounds a bit difficult because you're going. I suppose you can. If you're going to do all inside ACLs with hamstrings and Artelon, it should be the same technique. You should be able to manipulate the ends into the proximal and distal hole. Because all it is just it makes your graft bigger. That's all.
Correct. I've seen it done. As you, Dr. Lim pointed out, it's really just about the technique. You know, developing the tools to implant it and get good fixation. Artelon has been used to augment hamstring grafts, patellar tendon grafts, quad tendon grafts. So there's ways to do it in all different ways in the ACL. It really just comes down to technique and methods.
Right. Dr. Aaron, yesterday you discussed with me the brilliant parts of Artelon is the physiotherapy is cut short. Can you just tell us more about that? It's like you can push the patients to go more aggressive, go physio more aggressively. Is it what you mean? And what is the difference before? Before you use Artelon and then after you use Artelon, what are the difference in the physio you prescribe to the patient?
Okay, I think it'll be the same experience as what Aaron Smith has had and the ankle surgeons have had in US. They have less pain, there's less swelling. Basically, the patients get up faster, they bend the knee the next day, and instead of having to coax them into doing the physio, actually I do BD physio now, because you find by the afternoon, the day after the surgery, by the afternoon physio, they're all walking. So the physio is a lot faster. The pain is a lot less. They feel more stable. There's a lot less pain in the knee joint, and they can actually move a lot faster. And I think that is one of the main reasons why I'm very happy with Artelon, because the rehab has changed completely. Previously, I used to have difficulty getting these patients, especially with hamstring grafts, difficulty getting these patients to move. Because they have pain, they have hamstring pain, they find that the knee is a bit stiff, they find the knee is a bit swollen, not as maybe compliance is not the word, because I'm sure they have pain, but basically it's the pain factor that limits them. And with the Artelon, they are really stable. I mean, I'm sure you're at 6 weeks, when you all do a Lachman's test with just pure hamstrings, you always find that there's this give. Then you start thinking, oh, has my graft torn? Is it loosened? And then you're very scared to move them. Try using Artelon, because at 6 weeks it doesn't give. You just keep going. It really makes a lot of difference. You just try one ACL, tension it, pull on it so that it's a bit tight, and then you remember at 6 weeks you do a Lachman's and you will know the difference. Because it is so much more stable at 6 weeks. You don't have to worry about tendon lysis at 6 weeks, because it doesn't soften. It really is very stable.
All right.
I think that's a really good point that we skipped over a little bit. But during early healing of autografts, you have this necrosis phenomenon where, through the process of harvesting that graft, you've killed it. It's a dead tissue.
Yes.
So before the body can remodel a new tissue, it has to eliminate the dead stuff, has to get rid of dead cells, has to break down the matrix. And there's been a lot of data to show that during the first 12 weeks after placement of an autograft, it'll lose 50 to 80% of its strength before it begins to remodel. And that's when those patients are most vulnerable, to elongation and stretching. And that's really what Artelon is there to protect.
Actually, if any of you want to come and see ACLs with Artelon, please come up. I'm quite happy to show you the technique I use here. It's not, I don't have problems with that. So if you want to come and visit, just let Artrotech team know, and then that's fine. And I'll arrange a few ACLs for you to see in a day.
Thank you again, Dr. Aaron. And again, this we never pay Dr. Aaron for this. This is
no, honestly, you have to try this. Okay, it is amazing. Once you've tried it, you will not go back. I can tell you, it is amazing stuff.
Dr. Aaron, you've been utilizing Artelon for ACL together with your ALL construction, is it?
Yes, if I have an ALL to do, I will just use Artelon on its own. I don't use autograft anymore.
So now all your ACL is together with ALL, or?
No. The decision making for ALL is still the same. You decide whether it's loose before you do an ALL, but all my ACLs now I will use an piece of Artelon with hamstrings. Yeah.
I thought you have the extra length of Artelon, so you just must well utilize it on all your.
I know some of them don't need an ALL, so don't do extra surgery for nothing now. Not everybody needs an ALL, and you can go on arguing about whether you need an ALL the whole day because it's still not completely solved yet. But I believe that you should. I believe that the extra strut on the lateral side, for revisions especially, you should do. In some of the primaries, you should do.
Okay, I have another questions from Dr. Sazali. First question is, in PCL reconstructions with Artelons, does grade 1 posterior drawer improve after graft incorporations? It's more towards Dr. Aaron.
Answer is yes. You almost don't get a grade 1 already. It almost becomes a normal PCL.
Right. But the question 2 is, in failure cases with Artelon, any problem with tunnel widening?
That's why I want somebody to go through my results. To be honest with you, I have not had a patient come in with an Artelon ACL failure yet, although I know my friend has had one, but I have not had one with failure yet. But don't forget, this is now 3 years down the line. So I think next year, when it's 4 or 5 years, when there's more than 50% absorption, then probably you'll start getting failures. So you have to wait for that, because at the moment, nobody has come back with a failure with Artelon at this point in time.
What about Aaron Smith?
Yeah, I can speak to the study data a little bit. I mean, like all surgeries, you'll have some baseline rate of failure. And in the published studies where you had failures of Artelon in the ACL, you typically did not see widening of the tunnel. The tunnel widening is usually due to foreign body reaction and osteolysis, which is, you generally don't see that with Artelon.
Right. Yes. Aaron, I want to ask, like for ATFL, you use Artelon. So you insert the Artelon into the bone. So what if, can we use without inserting the Artelon into the bone?
Yeah, so you can, if you can, there's indications where we'll use Artelon where you will use a traditional suture anchor, and you can just use the sutures on top of the anchor to tie it down to the bone. And you'll see incorporation of that Artelon at the bony surface. We now have some data on osteogenesis for Artelon in tunnels where, if you take the Artelon into a bone tunnel, that Artelon material that's in the bone will fill in with, bone progenitor cells and will start to mineralize and will incorporate in the bone as well. So there's a lot of ways to go about fixation of Artelon to bone. It's really just ease of use. I think typically what we say is surgeons to use the fixation devices that you feel comfortable with in the operating room, and Artelon's pretty flexible to be used with those devices.
Does it have any add points to insert the Artelon into the bone compared to without?
I'm sorry, could you ask one more time?
Do we have any advantages to insert the graft into the bone compared to instead of without putting the graft inside, with or without?
Yeah, I could speculate, but I don't think we have a direct comparison. We've seen both ways be successful. I think typically when we're taking Artelon through bone tunnels, the real advantage is just tensioning. It gives the surgeon the opportunity to pull a certain amount of tension on the Artelon before they do the fixation with an interference screw. So it's more of a technical advantage than a biological one.
Okay, right. So you mean we can just do it with suture ankles and tie it down. All right.
Correct. Yep.
That's great. That's great. And maybe besides the foot and ankles and all the ACL, PCL, MPFL, do you have any others indications that it's good to use Artelon for?
Yeah, I mean, ankles, knees, and shoulders is most of our business, and we've spoken about most of those indications. There's more exotic things you'll see, like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, patients with generalized laxity. That can be a real challenge, and we've had good success using it in hypermobile joints that you have too much laxity. But no, I think we've covered most of the main indications.
All right, great. Everyone, any other questions before we end today's sharing? It is a very good sharing. It's a lot of inputs for today. And thank you everyone for this evening. And thank you, Aaron. Both Aarons, thank you very much. And I wish you a good day ahead. Okay, Aaron?
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.